Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. Our guest this week is Amy Newman, principal of Newton Elementary in Surrey, British Columbia. Amy's experience in schools leads this interesting conversation with advice for new principals and vice principals. Things like a story of a student who sent her a letter of appreciation 3 years after moving on to high school. Secondly, if teaching is a verb, so is principling a verb. Thirdly, it's important to find out the backstory for students who come to the principal's office. This week's episode is brought to you by grass. Grass can communicate through chemical signals. When it's cut or damaged, it releases volatile organic compounds into the air. This phenomenon is often referred to wound-induced signaling, and it actually shows a fascinating aspect of ecosystems and how they operate at a more complex level than you might expect from something as simple as grass. At the end of this episode, be sure to visit our website, www.restorative.ca, where you can find some great leadership ideas from a restorative and relational perspective. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to subscribe on Spotify or YouTube. So let's head over to this discussion with me, Stan. Welcome, Amy, to our podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to talk with you again. When we talked last, you had mentioned a story about a former student that had written you a letter. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure thing. This was at a previous school, and I had known the student in grade 7. Now they're in grade 9, and I'm at a new school. And randomly got an email from the student saying, "Hey, Miss Newman, I've been thinking a lot about you, and I just wanted to reach out and let you know I'm staying out of trouble. And I'm trying to keep my bad habits down and trying to be a better person. I'm more active in my sports and I'm working hard, and I just wanted you to know that." And then they just said, I just wanted to thank you. You were the best principal I've had, and I feel like you were the only one who really believed in me." And I felt like that was quite powerful, that somebody's writing to me like that a couple years after really not any contact, and he's still thinking about our relationship and our connection. And that was really meaningful to me. And I thought about that sentence, "You were the only one." I thought, I'm not sure that's true. He had an amazing teacher, but that was his perception. Yeah, I found that very moving.
It's an amazing story. And now, what was your experience as a principal of this student?
The student needed a lot of support and love and care and kind of a wraparound approach. I just tried to be really available and really open and very just responsive to whatever he was needing. I always had eyes on, and my door was open, and he knew he could come for a break or just to talk. And I think sometimes, particularly in an elementary school, there aren't those spaces and places in a school.
It sounds like you're already getting into some advice for principals and vice principals in terms of how you would want them to connect with students.
Yeah, I think relationality it's critically important to be really open and responsive, to listen and lead with your heart. A lot of these are kind of tropes, but I think for me, principling is about, and I always use the word principling. I verbed it because we have teachers who are teaching, and I use the word principals who are principling because when you turn a word into a verb, it brings it alive and it brings action. So it's just a living, breathing process. So I feel like I try to be really intentional, really embodied. So I'm very aware of my physical position, my stance, my body language will maybe soften, and that it's a really dynamic process when you're with other people. And so I actually am really try to be try to be really thoughtful about all of those qualities. And in particular, that idea of it's really counterintuitive, I think, but that idea of yielding, Wagamese's be like grass we spoke about, and the pressure comes on us and we're flattened, but when the pressure is relieved, we spring back and we're resilient. And it's okay to be feeling that pressure and just hold it and then release it when the pressure subsides.
Can you describe that picture of Wagamese's be like grass?
Yes, he's in a conversation with a grandmother, and he's saying, she's asking him to be a gentle man, and he says, you like polite and all this, and she's no, a gentle man to act softly and kindly, etc. And you don't need to be hard. And this is the most common principal trope. Like, I'm a 5'1" on a good day, female, and people often will say, "Oh, yeah, he was tough," or we need somebody bigger, stronger, tougher. We need you to be tough and hard. They need to know that there's a line here, and I think those kind of are old tropes, and I feel like a more contemporary or maybe progressive model of leadership is one where we, like the old woman says, can get stepped on and flattened, but regain your shape against once the pressure passes, that it's humble, accepting, and soft. And in that humbleness, accepting, and softness is where the strength is. And so understanding that and being able to be gentle with students and open to what's arriving when they show up in your room or outside your door, and not feel like you need to be holding a hard line. I think that's a really critical practice that I try to be really intentional about.
And how does that being like grass go over with staff that want that harder line, that firmness?
That's a great question. I think, one, they get used to my style. And secondly, I'm very curious. I might say to a staff member, what how do you think this particular consequence will support the child in the future? How will this hard line, what will be the outcome? What do you think will be the outcome of taking this hard line?
I
Right?
love that question. I love that question.
And if they, if it's really about punishment, I don't, and we come to that, often we come to that recognition together. We're just punishing the child. We take a different path.
Go
Sometimes it
ahead.
takes a little bit of a while for people to get used to me. And I think more and more principals are like this. We're trying to be caring, safe people for everybody on staff, teachers and students. It might be just really staying curious if the teacher wants a particular thing to happen. And sometimes we compromise, but always looking for what feels restorative, what feels like is going to be, in the end, not harm the person, the student's self-esteem or self-image, and go away thinking, okay, they believe in me. That's important.
And I think what you're getting to is something that comes up again and again for the work that we do, and that is distinguishing between punishment and consequences. If there's a particular action, there can be consequences, but they don't necessarily have to be punishments. For example, there were a couple of grade 7 students out in the yard, and just before they came in, they were out for recess. Somebody just whipped a basketball across the yard and hit this other kid just square in the head and just knocked him over, like a major headache. And so, of course, the person who was hit by the basketball gets helped into the office. And the principal starts talking with the student who had been hurt. And I think we may have to look at some type of punishment or whatever. And it was the student who said, because the principal did ask some questions like, what do you think? And what would help you? And the student said, I just want him to see how much he hurt me. That's it. And
Mm.
so the other student was called down. They had a conversation. The one who threw the ball apologized, and the person who was hit by the ball was satisfied because he got a chance to say something about it as well. And there was a consequence, but it wasn't a punishment.
That's a great example. I'll also ask that question, what do you need?
Yeah,
How
that's a
can I
great
help
question.
you? Or what would help you? What do you need right now?
Mm-hmm.
I think those questions are really important because they're empathic and they're compassionate.
They're open-ended, right?
And they're open-ended. What would help you? You never know what you're going to get when you ask that question. But it's a really different way to frame a question. And the student recognizes that maybe you're not really thrilled about whatever they did, like chucking the basketball, but they're still a good person. And I often
Mm-hmm.
just state that directly.
Yeah.
You're a really great guy, or you're just the best student. And it's not insincere, but I'll say to the
No.
student, you you're a really great kid. These are the things I've seen, I've noticed. And this is something different. What's happening? And sometimes they'll say, oh, there's maybe a big conflict at home, or
Mm-hmm.
something happening in their life because the behavior is a little bit unexpected.
Yeah. And what you're doing there is you're really distinguishing between the person who has value and this action, which is something separate. We can deal with this action. We're not here to judge or say you're good or bad, but this action has been inappropriate, right?
Mm.
And the other thing I really like is when you find out the backstory, right? You are in a position where you may find out more of those kinds of situations where you go into it thinking, oh, this is what it is. And then you realize it's something completely different. Have you had any experiences where you can think of knowing the backstory really helped me address something with a child?
I'm laughing to myself because I had probably 7 conversations like that today. For example, a student gets escalated in class over something, angry and upset over something, which is really a small thing. Teacher asks them to leave because they're angry and disruptive. They come to me and I ask these open-ended questions. Hey, like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, or how you doing? Hey, what's going on? And then the story starts, right? And it just starts to unravel and it gets dense. And maybe it turns out mom and dad are separating, or some really tragic things can happen, or maybe their pet passed away. There's something that is happening in their life which just is so disruptive and so disarming that they can't manage themselves in school. And so when teachers are busy teaching and doing their job and they're working so hard, sometimes they can't in that moment. They don't have the luxury in that moment of pausing like we do as principals to just say, what's going on? Sometimes just that one question will unravel this whole backstory, as you said, of pain and suffering, or feeling like they're disappointing someone, or feeling frustrated that they can't read as well as someone, like whatever it is. It could be school related or home related, but then you can really start to work on supporting what's unfolding in their life. And as you say, focus on the person and the humanity of the situation.
Amy Newman's advice to new principals and vice principals starts with being open, responsive, and available, and that creates a supportive environment where students feel valued and understood. She recommends asking open-ended questions like, "What do you need?" And that allows for empathic responses that address the underlying needs of the students. And when you uncover those underlying issues, such as personal struggles or family challenges, it enables you as a principal to provide appropriate support and guidance. Find out more about our work with restorative practices and school leaders at www.restorative.ca. Email me, stan@restorative.ca. Principling is a verb which leads to actions. Be sure to join us for part 2 with Amy Newman.